Imagine a hotel with no stairs, not because they couldn't afford them, but because having no stairs was the whole point. It was a hotel built from timber. It was shipped in by rail, and it was assembled on site on the coast. I'm just approaching Birchington footbridge, past the flowers, courtesy of the Birchington in bloom. It's amazing, this footbridge must be over 55 years old. I can remember when it was built. And to think now, a footbridge of this sort, with this sort of accessibility, a new one would cost in excess of £1 million. This is a proposed footbridge a bit further down the line. So we're just walking around here, approaching towards just over there where those flats are. Just a little alleyway down there towards platform 2. As we move down here to where these flats are here. This is Bierce Court, which was formerly the site of the Bungalow Hotel in Birchington. I don't know for certain, but it kind of suggests that these are perhaps warden assisted flats just along here. This leads down, that's Beach Avenue that leads down to Beresford Gap. And that was like a giant piece of Victorian flat pack. It's a hotel also where, quite close by, a dying poet spent his last days. Curiously and interestingly, it was where a German U-boat survivor from the Second World War, and he was the only survivor of that U-boat apparently, he once worked in the kitchens of the said hotel. It's also where one summer the children of a famous novelist put on plays for a legendary actress. This is the story of the Bungalow Hotel, and it's how Birchington-on-Sea hosted some of the strangest and the most glamorous and the most tragic chapters of history throughout Thanet. So here's the latest episode of Birchington Unplugged. Picture Birchington in the 1870s. Quiet, coastal, perhaps on the edge of being somewhere. And then between 1872 and 1878, something unusual rises beside the railway station. Not built brick by brick, but manufactured off-site. And that was in timber frame sections and then delivered to the site by train, all ready to be slotted together like components of a machine. The mind behind this was a Victorian architect, John Pollard Seddon, and he worked alongside John Taylor. John Taylor was the property developer who spearheaded the UK bungalow movement. Together, they weren't just building a hotel, they were pioneering a completely new way of living, the bungalow, and that's putting Birchington-on-Sea at the centre of an architectural revolution in the UK. So, the Bungalow Hotel, a single-storey building made of timber, sprawling across the land, a place where there were croquet lawns, tennis courts, and painted boldly across the entrance, there were two words which became the marketing strategy: no stairs. And this was in an age when seaside hotels were competing to be the tallest and the grandest, the most imposing. Birchington's answer was to go low, and it worked. The absence of stairs wasn't a limitation. It was actually pitched as therapy. The advertising stated, all rooms on one floor. The early days is a healthy luxury. And that was to attract elderly guests and also those physically challenged. Quite innovative for that time, don't you think? By the time the hotel welcomed its first guests in around 1882, it had already become something extraordinary. Somewhere the London artistics crowd and the theatrical people, they were drawn to this place, tucked away in the corner of the Thanet coast. Very close by was the Westcliff Bungalow, and that was provided by the architect J.P. Seddon, and it was for his close friend, the pre-Raphaelite painter and poet Dante Gabriele Rossetti. Rossetti spent his final days there before passing away, and as we know, he's buried in All Saints Churchyard, right near the entrance. It's a place of rest that many people come to visit. At that time, the Bungalow Hotel and the surrounding bungalows became a quiet gathering point for all of the pre-Raphaelite circle. Birchington, for a brief moment, was where English art history drew its final breath. The glamour of that didn't just stop with painters and artists. Legendary Victorian stage actor Sir Squire and Lady Bancroft were frequent guests. The children of author Daphne du Maurier and playwright Frederick Lonsdale stayed at the hotel for their Christmas holidays. As children performed improvised plays on the little stage built for them by the management, and that was right in front of Lady Bancroft herself. Yet, fame doesn't pay the bills. By 1889, the hotel had been taken over by a local businessman, and it faced some real financial turbulence at that time. There was a filing for bankruptcy in 1903, and also in 1909. That was as holiday trends were shifting at that time. The world that made the Bungalow Hotel special was already beginning to change. When the First World War arrived, the Kent coast stopped being a playground and became a frontier. There were coastal travel restrictions, and a change in management followed as defence precautions took hold. And in May 1915, Albert James Logan Ferrier Pryor became the hotel's licensee, with records showing that the licence later transferred to Teresa Walter and then to Mr. A.F. during the wartime years. That's a small paper trail of the hotel simply trying to survive. Then later, of course, came the Second World War, and Thanet's transformation was completely total. The whole region became a fortified military zone, and of course the civilian holiday trade just shut down. So what happened to the Bungalow Hotel? Well, of course, it was requisitioned by the military and used as billets for Canadian soldiers stationed along the Kent coast to help guard against invasion. Now here's the fascinating little bit of history, and it's one of those strangest little secrets. A German chef named Franz Machon had worked at the Bungalow Hotel before the war. During World War II, he served aboard the German U-boat U-512. That submarine was sunk in 1942, and Herr Machon was its sole survivor. After his capture, he went on to cooperate with the US Navy as an observer. Think about that for a moment. A man who once cooked breakfast for elderly holidaymakers, Birchington, ended up as the last man standing from a sunken German submarine in the Atlantic. So the hotel limped on into the mid-20th century. It gained a music and dancing license in the 1930s and again in the 1950s. Still a hub for local life, even as the Victorian holiday era faded. But by 1980, time had finally caught up with it. As it happened, my mother-in-law and my wife worked as chambermaids in the last days of the Bungalow Hotel. So the hotel itself had outlived and survived 2 world wars, and after a century of changing tastes, it was finally demolished. In its place on that site, including where the former tennis courts were, is now a set of flats called Bierce Court, and they were built in 1987, a complex of flats and cottages standing very close to Birchington-on-Sea railway station. Walking past it now, without the knowledge of that history, you would never have known that there was a Bungalow Hotel on that very site. Nothing to suggest Victorian holidaymakers, nothing to suggest children performing for a stage actress, nothing to suggest that a German once worked there and served breakfasts, and he was a U-boat survivor. But that's the quiet power of Birchington's history. It doesn't shout. It sits underneath the surface of ordinary streets, asking for people like us to ask with curiosity those questions. Perhaps there's something worth carrying from the Bungalow Hotel and its story beyond the history itself. It was built on a simple yet stubborn idea. That was that the ease of accessibility could be a form of luxury, that removing those barriers could be a gift rather than a compromise. No stairs wasn't just a marketing line. It was an early and unlikely act of care for people who needed it. Perhaps it helped form part of the care we now see quite frequently as we go around today. Ramps instead of steps, lifts and elevators, tactile pavements for those with poor sight, wheelchair access. A century on, in the large village that it is now, that's still built around community and care. That idea hasn't gone away, not anywhere at all. You've been watching and listening to Birchington Unplugged. If this has been of interest to you, please subscribe and keep up to date with later material that I shall supply to you. There's so much history in this village of Birchington, and I'm really anxious to explore it and share it with you. Thank you for listening and watching. Bye for now.